Welcome, everyone, to the Leading Together podcast Insights for Delaware's Tomorrow. I'm Julia Keller, Executive Director of First State Educate, and your host for today's show. Today's conversation is about what it's like to lead from within a system. We are going to hear from an expert educator from New Jersey who is now, after being recognized as the best in her state, is going to share with us what her journey was like as an educator, but also the work she's doing now as Teacher of the Year. So I am pleased to introduce you to Gillian Ober. She's the 25-26 New Jersey Teacher of the Year. She's an ESL teacher in the Freehold Borough School District, where she works with multilingual learners and helps students navigate both language development and academic success. And what's amazing about the work that she's doing is that not only was she fantastic in the classroom and changing lives, but as Teacher of the Year, she's engaging with educators, communities, and policymakers across the state, bringing all of those fantastic classroom experiences with her into a broader conversation about how schools can better serve students. So, Gillian, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. This is so exciting. I've only done one podcast before, so it's just exciting. And yeah, I'm still pinching myself over this role, but it's been a
Yeah.
true honor this year.
Yes, I mean, just tracking what I can see from outside about what you've been doing and talking with you, I think you've poured your entire heart and soul into this. But
It's been a whirlwind.
yeah, so tell us, how did it start? I mean, how'd your journey in education start? Why this career and how do you think about shaping how students learn?
Yeah, what's kind of funny is I had no idea I wanted to be a teacher. My family jokes with me that it took me 26 countries and a trip around the world to figure that out.
Mhm.
But really, kind of the moment that I point to is I did a teaching fellowship in Thailand. I was trying to figure out. I knew I liked teaching, but I was really trying to figure out like, is this my lifelong passion?
Mhm.
And it was monsoon season in Thailand, and my classroom, no joke, was in the middle of construction. It's like there's a puddle in my room. There's water coming through the ceiling. And I remember just looking at my students and thinking to myself, like, why am I not absolutely miserable in this moment? Like,
Mhm.
old me would have hated this. And I
Mhm.
just looked at the kids and they were so engrossed in the project they were doing. They were laughing, they were speaking in English. And that was
Mhm.
kind of, I call it like my monsoon moment. Like that was when I knew I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
okay, this is for me.
Mhm. And so that's, I mean, difficult conditions and still sort of saying, "Wow, this is exactly where I wanna be." But also you mentioned the language. So why is it that this, learning English or being someone who speaks, more than one language, how did that become such a central part of how you approached being an educator?
Yeah, I think my entire life I've always been, drawn to languages and I love traveling. And it was something that at first started off as just something, like a hobby for me. Um, but working with these students, and especially my time teaching abroad, I had that experience of being a newcomer in another place.
Mm,
When I went, I am bilingual, I speak Spanish. So the reason I went to Thailand was in Spain as a teacher, I felt a little bit like I was cheating. I was like, "Ah, I
yeah.
speak the language. Like, I want to go somewhere that's really going to push me outside my comfort zone." So arriving in Thailand, I was in a town of maybe 10,000 people. I did not speak the
Mm,
language. This culture was completely new to me,
mhm,
and the way that the teachers there embraced me, the way that my students embrace me, it's just something that will stick with me forever. And I think why now it just means so much to me that I work
mhm,
with newcomers in the United States. So many of my
mhm,
students have just come to the United States. Many of them have been through tough journeys to get here, have gone through
mhm,
more than the average adult might have in their lifetime. And I just always try and ground myself in that feeling of remembering what it's like to be somewhere where a language and a culture, everything's new and it's
mhm.
scary.
Yeah.
Because there's just something
So there's
special about working with students like that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of empathy and sort of human connection in your practice. And then
Yeah.
how do you find strategies? What are the strategies that work best with that kind of learner? Whether it's that English is a new language for them or they're coming into a new world where they kind of don't know the implicit rules that guide, how are we supposed to do this thing that you
Yeah.
have me here for Monday through Friday?
Yeah, because so much of our education system is so like culturally embedded too that it's not just oh, I'm going to school in a different country. It's a whole different ball game. It's a whole different
Right.
ballpark.
Right.
Um, but just I think what my job is I kind of joke sometimes like, I have content strategies, I have way of teaching the academic portion, but I think half of my job and why I love it so much is I have to develop relationships with my students first. Without
Mm,
trust between my students and I, the strategies aren't going to work because,
mhm,
research and scientific study of language acquisition shows
mhm,
us that when your anxiety is up here, you are it's not going to stick. You're not going to acquire any
mhm,
language. So I think honestly, usually when I start out a school year, the first 2, 3 months are really about
mhm,
relationship building in my classroom and creating those opportunities for my students to see me as a human. Like,
mhm,
I'm not afraid to be my weird self in front of my students, and I want them to let down that guard that they might have up,
mhm,
because that's when the real teaching can take place, is when we've kind
mhm,
of created this classroom community, that they can really start to dive into learning the language.
mhm. And I may be wrong, but it seems to reason that these would be good. That would be a good approach, a good human-centered approach to do in any classroom, right? I mean, you've leveraged it in a particular classroom, but really sounds like something probably a lot of teachers lean into in terms of connecting with their students.
Yeah, especially too, like in this age of TikTok, and our kids are like in front of screens all the time.
Yeah.
Good teachers, we know it's about connection. Like that's why I'm never afraid when people are like, oh, AI is going to take over, or there's going
Mhm.
to be robot teachers.
Yeah.
I just can't ever see that being, because to get to a kid, it has to be a human being. There has to be human
Mhm.
connection for real learning to take place.
Mhm. And how do you individualize the supports, right? Because they are sort of, there's maybe a common need, but they're all individual learners. So you're probably
Yeah.
also, connecting on a universal human level. But what are some of the ways that you found to be most effective with this population? Because it's about 35% of the student population in Delaware. So
Yeah.
what are some best practices that you again, because our podcast is for boards, right? So this is in a way kind of
Yeah.
educating people who are making policy, to help them know what should be considered.
Yeah. I think, within my classroom, I have sometimes a range of students. I have students in my classroom sometimes who are pre-literate in any language, to students who may be a grade or two behind in terms of their content knowledge. And then within that, all of these different English proficiency levels. Um, so I think step one is I really have to I get to know each student and their needs on an individual level. So I
Mhm,
understand where they're coming from in terms of their background knowledge, what their strengths are, where I might need to provide more supports. Um, but then honestly, I know I was just joking about AI taking over, but
mhm,
AI has been a huge tool for me personally, to help differentiate for all the different needs that I have in my room. Because I think sometimes multilingual educators, ESL teachers, oftentimes we're few and far between. Districts can't always
mhm,
hire a million of us to attend to all the needs in a,
mhm.
in a classroom. So sometimes it's one of me and 20 kids that need my help. So
Right,
the ability to take my knowledge, and this is the human piece, where I know my students
right.
and I know what they need, to have a platform that can help me on the fly say, hey, you know what? For Maria, this worksheet isn't helping her right now. She needs more
Mhm,
pictures. In two
mhm.
minutes, I can make
Yeah,
that on the spot
mhm,
and have it ready
yeah,
for her.
yeah,
So that tension with technology, like I was totally one of those teachers in the beginning that
mhm,
was like, nope, I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. It scares me.
mhm, mhm,
And kind of out of necessity, I needed help. I felt like I was floundering a bit because I had so many
mhm,
needs in one classroom.
mhm.
It's kind of like I have this teaching assistant at my fingertips to use my expertise and my knowledge of my kids and what they need to generate it for me. It takes a lot of that
Yeah,
administrative work off my hands. So
that's
I think
great.
definitely AI, it's a scary topic, but I think a lot of
Mhm,
states, I'm hopeful that from the top down, we start giving better
mhm,
guidance about how to ethically use it, and
mhm,
ways that it can be a positive tool, because it's
mhm.
here, right? And we need to learn how to use
It's
it,
not
and
going anywhere.
it's not going anywhere.
No.
Exactly. So kind of giving that guidance of how are our students supposed to deal with this, and then how can
Hmm.
we use it and ways to mitigate the negative impacts it can have as well.
Right. Yeah. One more question about the classroom and school-based stuff,
Yeah.
before we move on, because I do want to talk about the governance piece and your work with the department. But um, connecting with families, why is that different with the student population that you focus on?
I think, it's so important to make families feel like they have a seat at the table,
Hmm.
because it's their children, right, in our hands. They're trusting us. Like sometimes teachers spend more time with these kids than their parents get to, depending on when they work and when they're home. Um, but I think, sometimes like when you're working with multilingual learners, I'm privileged that I do speak the native language a lot of the families that I
Hmm.
work with. But I know
Hmm.
it can be a struggle for some teachers who might not necessarily speak that native language that a
Hmm.
family that is their heritage language. But I
Hmm.
think now there's so many tools available to us. Google Translate has come a long way since I've
Yeah.
started teaching. That
Yeah.
it's much more accurate than it used to be. And now there's all these amazing apps like Remind, um,
Hmm.
and ways that you can communicate with families where it will translate for you.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's so, so, so critical, and especially during kind of the political climate we're living in right now, and the realities of what some of our students are dealing with outside of school and their families in terms of immigration
Hmm.
enforcement and things that are raising anxiety in a lot of different ways outside of the classroom.
Yeah.
Um, I think building those relationships with families before they need help, or before there's a crisis, or before it's in the
Yeah.
in the vein of like help, you
Hmm.
want to build that relationship before you get there.
Before you need it. Yeah. Exactly.
It's
Right.
the
Yeah.
trust. It always goes back to the trust. If
Hmm.
you show that you're willing to help and that you're a trusted adult in that child's life that cares about them and their
Hmm.
future,
Hmm.
I think it just all around creates positive impacts for you as a teacher because you have a parent support, but for that
Hmm.
student as well who knows that like they're not just a number in your classroom. You see them as a
Right.
human, and you understand where they come from, and who else is a part of their life.
Yeah. So, right, I was true to the opening. I said we would talk about all these amazing things you did at the school level, which I think your practice is incredible, and kudos to you, congratulations for on
Thank
your
you.
career and your accomplishments. But tell us now, what? So now you're at the New Jersey Department of Education. Now here you are representing teachers, representing the practice. What's
Yeah.
what's that like? It must be surreal in a lot of ways to start like kind of like looking behind the curtain to figure out how it
I
works, but then
that's
kind of
You
the
took the words out
perspective
of my
gain.
mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's honestly, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if I was going to like it because I think when you're on the teacher end of things, sometimes, like it's easy to shake our fists and say, oh, the DOE, like we have to do this, or, oh, they didn't change that. Um, so I didn't know like how I was going to receive it. And it's been such an amazing experience because I get to experience kind of the other side of things.
Mhm.
And it's also really humanized a lot of, I think, when you're sitting in a classroom and you're reading, the new code that's been posted or a new policy that gets rolled out,
Yeah.
it's easy to be very critical. But
Sure.
now I'm in the place where I see the human beings behind these projects and what
Mhm.
they're trying to
Mhm.
do. And really,
Mhm.
everyone there has such good intentions that I'm
Yeah.
starting to understand that piece of kind of government work where it's really hard to scale things. So you
Mhm.
can have the best of intentions in creating a policy or creating a framework or a protocol that you think is really going to work. And then, in New Jersey, we have so many school districts and everything. You can
Sure.
go within the same town to two different schools and things
Mhm.
operate very differently.
Yeah.
Um, so it's been really interesting to be on the other side of things, and kind of empowering to get to be a part of some of these projects that will have an impact on a larger audience.
Mhm.
I think it's kind
Mhm.
of like woken up a part of my brain that was maybe a little dormant for a bit,
Mhm.
being in the classroom.
And I'm sure that you'll bring that perspective back, right? So you're experiencing it, but you'll share that with other teachers, right? Because I think hearing it from a peer, and it spreads that way. Other people will start to understand the process differently because they're teachers and you're a teacher and you're there and they can relate to you and kind of it sort of
Yeah,
has this positive normalizing effect.
yeah,
Uh,
domino effect.
yeah,
But I think
exactly.
it's sort of been, you can say the same for my presence at the DOE. It's been really great to be in some spaces where, it was a little intimidating at first.
Mhm.
I started off this year The governor of our new governor asked me to be on one of her transition teams. So I found myself at the very like onset of my sabbatical in these meetings with all the top education executives and
Mhm.
nonprofit developers, and
Yeah.
I was kind of like, oh, I'm just a teacher. And one thing that I've learned these past 6 months is like I'm never saying that again, because
Yeah.
I found myself in spaces where my voice, while I might not have known everything on that topic, my voice is
Mhm.
somebody on the ground actually doing this work and thinking about the ways that it's going to trickle down and impact me and my students and my
Mhm.
coworker
Mhm.
students,
Yeah.
um, was something really valuable in those conversations. So I
Yeah.
think on the DOE side of things, it's showing me too that like it's sort of reignited my passion for the idea that like we have to include teacher voice at the table
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
we're the
Yeah.
ones doing this.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, I think that's a great, I mean, I think it's a universal too, so thanks for sharing that. This is, again, a conversation for board members to kind of remember, I think it applies at the district level too. You wanna make sure that everyone's connected with the person who's in the front line. And I don't wanna put you on the spot, but I'm sure that the audience is kind of curious, maybe there's a project you could tell us about. Maybe there's a are you allowed to talk about anything that some of your initiatives or the things that you
Yeah,
have
I think
going?
so.
Okay.
Something that's really exciting for me is our so in New Jersey we use the WIDA standards as our standards for
Mhm.
English language development, and it's in our code, our bilingual code, and they live on our website. But something that different advocacy groups and things in New Jersey have been trying to make happen is to get the WIDA standards up on our page with the rest of our New Jersey student learning standards. Because
Oh,
it's a small thing. Like it's just updating a web page, but it's a
mhm.
small thing that kind of sends a big message, right? That these
Right.
standards aren't just meant to live in ESL land. They're for
Yep.
everyone. They're for all
Mhm.
teachers to feel empowered and educated on how to help really any of their students, right? Because all students are learning academic language, and that's really what those
Mhm.
standards are grounded in.
Mhm.
Um, so hopefully by the end of my sabbatical, I've been collaborating with a bunch of the different directors and managers at the Department of Ed to rehome those standards and kind of
Mhm.
unpack them for the different content areas so that um, there's sort of a bigger awareness of these aren't just ESL
Mhm.
standards, they're for all of us.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so that's something that hopefully in the next few weeks will come to fruition, and I'm pretty excited about.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I would agree with you. It's pretty important, and there are, there's a universal through line there because even when you hear people say, "Oh, if you can't read by 3rd grade, it's a problem because by 3rd grade you're learning to read and then you're reading to learn," but there's
Hmm.
also that involves a whole new set of vocabulary, right? So it's kind of, I mean, similar. They're learning academic language. Everyone's learning new
Yeah, like
words.
any strategies
Photosynthesis
that we're
isn't in
using.
1st grade.
Exactly.
That word's not
Exactly.
there.
And just the discourse that we need to like our social English versus what we're using in a classroom and
Sure.
what we're striving for, like that academic
Yeah.
register. All students are learning that. That's not something, we're not talking about analyzing a paragraph when we have family dinner at home.
Right. Right. My house, we did that. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Let's not get into that. No. But I'm glad you brought up the example because I this is all the other topic that I wanted to make sure that we touched on. The work that you're doing now, you're bringing these ideas, an idea that is, this standard applies. It was from your own personal teaching experience. You're now making it available to other educators, and that's really systems change. That's what you're able to do, and that requires, in a lot of ways, advocating. It requires, building bridges. It requires bringing people in, right? And I was just wondering
Yeah.
if you could talk a little bit about what it's been like now working at the systems level, and how are you engaging with other people who are kind of the influence bearers or the decision makers for certain things that you would like to see happen.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a learning curve because you're in this new space where there's different protocols and how information
Mhm.
gets up to the next level of approval. Um,
Sure.
I definitely needed some like mentoring in that aspect because it was all brand new. It's a lot of paperwork.
Mm. Yeah.
um, but what's been really beautiful about the experience is I've had the chance to sort of, I'm very uniquely positioned at the Department of Education because I'm not technically an employee. So I'm
Mhm.
sort of like, I have the advantage of being able to sort of float between departments and pull from different resources. Not that that can't happen among departments at the Department of Education, but
Mhm.
everyone has, roles and responsibilities that I think sometimes it's easy to be in silos. So I think what's
Mhm.
really great is in my position, I had the chance to sort of like pull people from different departments to get their advice and expertise on
Mm.
things and pull people into meetings together so that we could put our heads together. And
Mhm.
that's sort of how some of these projects have come to fruition and sort of advanced over the past few months is uh, the collaborative piece is so important.
Mhm.
Um, so that's I know like it's been great for me, and I know some of the people that
Mhm.
I've been working with have also been excited about like wow, like that was so great to hear from so and so
Yeah.
because I never thought about it like that.
Right.
So that's been exciting too. I think that might be like a little bit of my teacher hat coming on because
Mhm. Mhm.
to be an ESL teacher, that's half of our job is getting different content area teachers to talk to one another and
Mm.
making sure we're like approaching a student's education as a whole team.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, it's been really great.
I would imagine you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of people get into education because they enjoy working with kids or they believe in the cause, and just the way our system is structured, it's kind of incentivized to move out of the classroom, which is a topic for another day. If you want to make more money, then you have to not teach. And so I'm just sort of curious if you're finding a lot of sort of enthusiasm from the people who sincerely care about education but find themselves very removed from the classroom, and really that's where they want to see the impact. I mean, they are in their mind, they do this work because of a child. That it's not
Yeah,
nameless and
yeah,
faceless. There's a room full of 30 kids that have a teacher in front of them, and they kind of believe in that, but that's just not where they step their foot. So I would
right.
imagine being able to talk with someone like you makes them feel, even if it's sort of figuratively, that they get a chance to be a part of that
No, it's
amazing process.
totally. I'm the middle woman in between.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I actually had a meeting today with someone who like recently attended a PD session, and they wanted to sort of unpack what they had heard um, like during this meeting and training to ask me like, okay, how do you see this playing out in your school? Like, can you give me some examples of
Yeah.
how this has impacted your teaching or ways that you use this? Would you do it differently? Um,
Mhm.
so that's been a really nice feeling too of like feeling that I am contributing. Like kind of what I was saying, I find
Yeah.
myself in these spaces where it's easy to feel a little intimidated because
Mhm.
um, coming from the classroom, I'm used to my little bubble.
Yeah.
But kind of being treated like the expert on the ground uh,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
is
Mhm.
really great because it's nice to see and hear. I'm sure when you're removed, like when you're sitting at the Department of Education day in and day out trying to make these policies and these
Mhm.
projects that you might not ever get to actually go see in person.
Yeah.
um, it's probably rewarding on that end to hear someone talk about it or even
Yeah.
helpful. Like if there's something I'd be like, you know what, this is working, but the issue we had in my school or the
Mhm.
issue that, in my classroom, what I saw,
Yeah.
um, I think it's been like a reciprocal, it helps me
That's
and it
great.
helps
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Amazing. I have two questions for you I mean,
Yeah.
I could sit here and talk to you for another hour, but the two things I wanna make sure I ask about are what do we need to do to improve outcomes for kids, right? What are a couple big levers where if we wanna see more better performance, meaning more mastery, right? I'm not talking about who's ranked where, but if we want this to work better for kids, what are a couple things that might be missing? And then a follow on to that is sort of advice for a boards. Board members are sitting there. You're at a school district board, and this is for Delaware, right? So we're not talking to anyone in New Jersey, but if a board were, if a board member in Delaware is listening to this, kind of what are a couple call outs to say, I'd suggest one or two things, even like maybe it's this collaboration theme that you're talking about. But so
That
outcomes and then recommendations for boards.
really, I think the over like arching piece of advice I would have is just we need to include teachers at the table more.
Mm,
Like having conversations and opportunities. I think sometimes like teachers are very passionate, but it's
mhm,
because we care so much and we have this wealth of knowledge that nobody else has. Like we're the
mhm,
people spending hours upon hours with these children and seeing what's working and what's not. Um,
mhm,
so I think finding, having informal conversations with teachers, but then finding spaces to have like inviting teachers to board meetings, like maybe having different
Mm,
topics and things that you can
mhm.
speak to really kind of like have your ear to the ground.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times what can happen is teachers are invited to the conversation after something's already been decided.
Mhm.
We're asked for feedback once it's done.
Done. Uh-huh.
And I think that's some of the issues that we run into with like turnover of programs, or we sign on for a new curriculum and that doesn't work and we
Mhm.
switch. I
Yeah.
think if teachers were included in the conversations from the onset, we could avoid
Mhm.
a lot of that.
Yeah.
And then um, just like outcomes for students too. I think a lot of we've spent a lot of time on screens and with technology, and I think it's something we couldn't avoid. COVID happened and kind of everything got turned upside down
Yeah.
and things became a lot more digital. Like,
Mhm.
I think about I go to the doctor on my phone now. Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
world
How did that
changed.
happen? Right.
Yeah, but I think what we're seeing is I think a lot of our students are sort of crying out for connection.
Mm, mhm.
And while technology can be amazing, it can't be everything that we do. We can't just throw
Yeah.
technology at everything to solve problems.
Mhm.
Um, so I think kind of getting back to some of our roots of paper and pencil too is something I've been talking a
Mm.
lot about lately.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, just as a kind of an add-on here, but how handwriting has changed,
Yeah,
and who types and how it's very different and how who's reading on a device and is that the same as if you're reading with a physical book, and what that
yeah.
does to teaching
A
and
lot of
teaching
I
and
know
learning.
some states are returning back to like we have to teach script again because
Yeah.
there are a lot of studies that show that handwriting is different than just typing on a keyboard. I
Yeah.
mean, I see it in my own classroom sometimes. Like
Yeah.
I work with seventh graders, and sometimes I'm like, wow, okay, I have to
Yeah.
decipher what this says, and it's not
Yeah.
it's not their fault because a lot of their schooling has been on a computer
Exactly.
and they're typing and
Yeah.
they the fine motor skills that you used to have to be able to
Right.
I remember sitting down and having to write an essay for an exam on loose leaf paper for 2
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
By that time, my
Yeah.
hand was hurting.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But this has been such a fabulous conversation. I appreciate you sharing what your experience has been like. I applaud you for the work, the amazing work you've done as a teacher in a classroom, and how many lives that you've been able to change, and just the trajectory that students are on, knowing that you care about them, that the
Thank you.
safety you've provided in your classroom, the connection with the families. I think also the connection and how well you represent teachers, plus your willingness to learn in the new role that you're in and add, but also, the word you used was reciprocal. So just really a beautiful conversation with a wonderful person who has
Thank
made a
you.
tremendous contribution.
Yeah, I wouldn't be here without, I think so much of the beauty of this sabbatical that I'm on is I've gotten to talk to so many teachers. I have this amazing cohort of the county
Mhm.
teachers the year one. So I'm just getting to hear from and learn from so many people
So many people,
that
right?
there's a thousand other teachers I know could be sitting here in this role.
Hmm.
But my responsibility is to just try and I want to make sure I'm representing everybody standing
Hmm.
alongside me. So
Yeah. And I
doing my
think you're doing
best.
that extremely well. You're doing that extremely well.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. To all of our listeners, thanks for being part of the conversation. If you're interested in more resources on the use of technology in schools or working with multi-language learners, please visit the Knowledge Hub. Thanks, and we look forward to seeing you next time.